Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're starting a new book. This book is titled The Buddha's Way. It's volume 10 of the book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. This program is a 1.5-year program where we're going through volumes 2 through 13 of this entire book series. It's the group learning program on Sundays and Wednesdays that we explore volume 1 of this book series, which is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Today we're going to be exploring chapters 1 through 10, and the way that I do this program is I invite students in Zoom to be able to read a particular chapter, and then I will share teachings on that chapter, and then open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask any and all questions that you like by submitting those into the comment section. And in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys to our class today, and at the same time invite you to study along with us the words of the Buddha, because this is what's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. There's meditation and other things like this that the Buddha taught, but you would need more than just meditation to be able to get to enlightenment. So by learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha, not believing them, but learning them, reflecting on them to independently verify them and practice them, that's what's going to transform the mind and move it to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. So I'm going to start here with chapter 1 of volume 10. And for anybody who's in Zoom, if you'd like to read at any point, just electronically raise your hand and let me know that you'd like to read. So here, chapter 1 is titled Right and Wrong Refuge. They go to many a refuge, to mountains and forests, to parks and tree shrines, people threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge, not the supreme refuge. That's not the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. But when having gone to the Buddha, the teachings, in the community for refuge, you see with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths: stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the stilling of stress. That's the secure refuge. That's the supreme refuge. That is the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. So here, the first thing to understand is, what is a refuge? A refuge is a place of protection, a place that's going to protect you. So what the Buddha is sharing here is that an individual who's threatened with danger might run to the mountains or the forest or to parks or tree shrines as a way of getting protection or this refuge. And he's saying that's not the secure refuge, the supreme refuge. That's not the refuge that's going to help you to eliminate discontentedness, which stress is part of that discontentedness. The mountains, the forests, the parks, the tree shrines, that's not going to help you to eliminate discontentedness of the mind. But that's where people oftentimes will run to looking for protection. The way that you get protection, and the Buddha here, what he's talking about in terms of this refuge or protection, is protection of the mind, that you're looking to protect the mind. That right now, perhaps, if somebody's disrespectful to you, you might get angry and frustrated and irritated because the mind is not protected. Instead, the way that you get this protection from these strong feelings and discontentedness is here he's saying, having gone to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. This is the refuge. This is the way to get protection of the mind. Because if you gain confidence in the Buddha, you gain confidence in his teachings, in the community that you're part of, then you can see with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is the first teaching that an individual would need to start to learn and understand in order to really firmly get on the path to enlightenment, where you establish right view. If you have wrong view, then the mind's going to blame other people. When you experience anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, any kind of displeasure or other discontent feelings in the mind, like stress and anxiety, an individual with wrong view will blame others because they haven't seen with right wisdom and penetrated the Four Noble Truths to have the breakthrough of understanding the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of the problem, and the complete path to eliminate the problem 100%. Here, the Buddha is describing it as stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and then the Noble Eightfold Path is the way of stilling the stress or eliminating it 100%. So it's the Four Noble Truths where you have this breakthrough to finally understanding that it's craving, desire, attachment. It's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. And this is why you can actually eliminate them, because the mind is causing these feelings itself. If you continue to believe that discontentedness is caused by others or caused by something external, then you're going to continue to experience these discontent feelings over and over. But it's through seeing with right wisdom, meaning you independently verify the Four Noble Truths, that you can have this breakthrough. And then having the breakthrough to understand what's causing the discontent feelings, you can actually eliminate them. So that's why it really is the first step to getting on the path to enlightenment. Once the Buddha awoke to enlightenment, his very first teaching was the Four Noble Truths to his first 5 students. And that's because it's so crucial in order to be able to understand the path to enlightenment and be able to make real progress. As you do that, the Buddha is saying that's the secure refuge. That's the supreme refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness. That's how you eliminate discontentedness, is by getting onto the path to enlightenment and training your mind. And that's a real protection, because now if somebody's disrespectful to you and the mind is protected by having developed your life practice, then your mind's not shaken up when somebody's disrespectful or having some other kind of things that are going on in your life. Maybe if you experience a death in the family, your mind might be shaken up thinking that this is because of your love or your care for that individual. But that's just because you haven't seen with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths and understanding that it's craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectation. The mind is craving for permanence. It's longing, it's yearning, it's wanting things to be permanent, but yet you live in an impermanent world. So this is the first teaching here in this first book. And what I should share here is that this confidence that you gain as you go to the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, the way that this is accomplished is through investigating the teachings of the Buddha, through examining them. You never are believing his teachings. That's how you actually gain this confidence. Because when somebody first comes to the path to enlightenment, you very well may have a certain amount of doubt in your mind. And the way that you eliminate this doubt is you investigate his teachings. You don't believe them. And then you reflect on them to independently verify them. And then as you're practicing them and you're transforming the mind and you're seeing this improved condition of mind where the mind's starting to become more peaceful, more joyful, you're having more focus and concentration, more clarity of mind, deeper memory. You're starting to notice perhaps that your personal and professional relationships are improving. This is how you know that the teachings that you're learning is leading to a better and better condition of your mind and a better and better life. And that's where you gain this confidence. So you need to be able to go to what the Buddha is saying here is having gone to, which means that you're seeking the teachings, you're learning the teachings, you're building this confidence through learning, reflecting, and practicing. So what questions do you guys have here on this first chapter of Volume 10? You can ask those questions by putting them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here from anybody anywhere. Since we've had a few people join us in Zoom, I'll just remind you guys, if you guys would like to read at any point, you can just electronically raise your hand and then you can read any of these chapters. So here, chapter 2, this one's titled, Beings are few who are reborn among human beings or heavenly beings, because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. Then the perfectly enlightened one took up a bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the monks thus, What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, that little bit of soil is incalculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn among human beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant compared to the great earth. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn among the heavenly beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. For what reason? Because, monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Okay, so what the Buddha is teaching here is that beings who are in the human realm and then die and are reborn back into the human realm or into the heavenly realm, from the human realm into the heavenly realm, are very few. He's sharing that where most beings are reborn from the human realm is they're being reborn into hell, the animal realm, in the realm of afflicted spirits. And the reason why is because they haven't seen the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is where you have that breakthrough to understanding the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. And if you don't understand this, you're going to continue to go around blaming other people for what you're experiencing. Your moral conduct is going to be such that you're going to be causing all kinds of harm in the world. And by the time you get to death, the condition of your mind is going to be such that you're going to experience rebirth because there's still craving, desire, attachment in the mind. And then based on the results of your decisions of having not trained the mind, then one would be reborn into these lower realms. It's important to understand that the Buddha never taught the cycle of rebirth as a way to guilt, shame, or fear people into learning and practicing his teachings. He's just explaining the true reality. He's explaining the natural laws of existence of what is happening and what isn't happening. So if somebody dies with craving, desire, attachment in their mind, there is going to be rebirth. And what realm you're born into is really important, because you're going to either have the opportunity to continue to make your way to enlightenment, or you're going to be born into the lower realms where these beings can't actually get to the enlightened mental state. They're going to need to be reborn countless times in those lower realms to ultimately get back to a human or heavenly birth where they can actually attain enlightenment. There's another teaching that the Buddha shares, that he says that when somebody dies with wrong view, meaning they haven't understood the Four Noble Truths and they haven't established right view, that they're reborn into hell or the animal realm. So this is essentially what he's sharing here too in long form, but he says it more directly in other teachings. Here he's saying it in long form, because being reborn into the human realm is the most ideal existence, where you can actually cultivate the mind and you experience all three feelings. You experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. So we tend to have built-in motivation to make our way to enlightenment because of those painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. You would like to get away from those. So that's like built-in motivation. Where beings in the heavenly realm, they only experience pleasant feelings, so they tend to be somewhat complacent, even though they're able to get to enlightenment. They oftentimes are complacent and they don't do the work, so they're oftentimes reborn into other realms, even the lower realms. You can move from the heavenly realm down into any of these other realms. None of these realms are permanent. Sometimes people might be taught that the goal is to get to the heavenly realm, but that's not the actual goal. The goal of the teachings is to train your mind to get to enlightenment and escape the whole cycle of rebirth. So just like the Buddha didn't use the lower realms as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into practicing his teachings, he didn't use rebirth as a way to incentivize you to practice his teachings. Like if you were taught that the goal is to get to the heavenly realm, this might have been used as kind of like a way to incentivize you to believe certain teachings or learn certain teachings. Remember, the Buddha already attained this perfectly enlightened mental state where his mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. He's not wanting anything. He's not expecting anything. He's not trying to convince you of anything. He's just helping all those that have a sincere interest to learn and practice his teachings and experience the same peaceful and joyful mental state. He's just helping those people to accomplish that. He's not forcing anything upon anybody. So his goal wasn't to try to force people to learn his teachings. It was to make himself available for the rest of his life for all those that have a sincere interest in learning and practicing his teachings. And then he would be able to guide them to this enlightened mental state. And learning the Four Noble Truths is the very first step in being able to accomplish that. So without having seen or been exposed to or explored the Four Noble Truths, you would have wrong view and most likely be reborn into the lower realms of existence. But having learned the Four Noble Truths, establishing right view, you're now able to have that breakthrough, and you're capable of making your way to increased development in your life practice, improving the quality of your mind. And now, if there needs to be rebirth, you can potentially be reborn into the human realm or into the heavenly realm. But the goal would be to escape this whole cycle of rebirth by getting to enlightenment in this life. So that if you put in a certain amount of work to learn and practice the teachings, you can then experience that peaceful and joyful mental state for the rest of this life, however long is left. But if for some reason you fall short and there is rebirth, then there's going to be an improved rebirth. So not only is there the opportunity to get to enlightenment in this life by doing the work to actually get to enlightenment and then enjoy the rest of your life in the enlightened mental state, but you can also attain enlightenment at death as well, which is potentially something that can occur for some individuals. You're not interested in banking on that or thinking that that is what's going to occur, because you're not going to necessarily know that during your lifetime. And that also means that all throughout your lifetime, you were still frustrated and annoyed and agitated and having stress and anxiety at different times. So what you would like to do is get to a point where you are actually learning and practicing the teachings, developing the mind so that you can then get to enlightenment in this lifetime and then experience enlightenment for the rest of this life, so that that way you don't experience the worry and anxiety and stress throughout this lifetime. You can live in peace and joy with the enlightened mental state. So here the Buddha is explaining that because people don't understand and haven't been exposed to these Four Noble Truths, they're oftentimes reborn in the lower realms. And if that's what needs to happen, then that's just what needs to happen. But for you, you would like to dedicate certain amounts of your time and effort and energy and resources to learning and practicing the teachings so that you can either get to enlightenment in this life or experience an improved rebirth in your next life. So what questions do you guys have on this chapter? Remember, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions that you like. Looks like Francis, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Teacher David. I have a question about what you mentioned about being in a human realm and potentially you can be reborn back in the lower realm. I can understand that coming to the human realm is actually like a privilege. It is I would say it's a privilege that you came from the lower realm and now in the human realm. And then when you die, and then if let's say you didn't follow the teachings of the Buddha, you have a wrong view throughout the life, you fall back onto the lower realm. So this is a reference to a family member who has been going through all their life, practicing also writing rituals, go in temple and pray and chant and ask for things and all that. Try to talk to the person, to adopt the true teachings, but it's very stubborn and all that. So it's, to me right now, it's quite disturbing to know that person may go down into a lower realm, from a human to a lower realm. So is that, to me, I look at it, it's quite disturbing, that I maybe get your input on this, because it's a family member, yeah.
Yeah, so the only reason why it's disturbing to you is because you're attached to them. As long as you have craving, desire, attachment in your relationship, you will crave for somebody to do something different than what they're doing. So the Buddha talks about if we have compassion for these members that are close to us, and we think that those people will heed our advice, that we can share the teachings with them and help them get established in the Four Noble Truths. But you need to understand that if you've done that 2 or 3 times in different ways and they're just not interested, you need to let go and just move on. The longer that you stay attached to this person learning the true teachings and developing their practice, then yeah, you'll feel disturbed or disappointed or frustrated or irritated that they're not learning and that they're potentially going to be reborn into a lower realm. And that's just the results of their decisions, and you can't control that. So all you can do for your own benefit and for your own enlightenment is to let go. And if you let go and you just become more and more and more and more peaceful and more enlightened, essentially, the people around you can see that. And then you can actually be more influential in that situation where someone might be like, whoa, you've been practicing those teachings for several years now and you're always joyful, you're always peaceful, like what are you doing? And then the people might take notice and they might not. But as long as you stay holding on to this family member, you won't be able to make your way to enlightenment because you're still attached to this individual.
Okay, I got what you said and all that. Okay, I think I'll just slowly learn to let go. But whenever I see the person, I have the strong attachment to, oh my God, I haven't done what I need to do and all that. So now I just, slowly try to let go of the thoughts and all that and just let it be, I guess the story also similar with you and your mom that you shared many times, maybe a few videos ago, that you just let it go and all that because you just didn't want to accept whatever you have said. So I think I just have something similar to yours actually. Okay, then I think I know what to do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Francis. You can only be helpful to people that have an open mind and that are interested in your help. If people have a closed mind and they're not interested, you can't help them. So it's usually best for people that are close to you, like family members, give them a book, this first volume that we have, or send them a link to a video, do that 2 or 3 times. And if they turn away from it and they're not interested in it, then just let go and move on. That way you're spending time with people who really have an interest. And you don't have to go out and propagate the teachings. There's no obligation or requirement for you to do that. But sometimes there's a craving for an individual to have their family member to practice the teachings. And one of the ways you can eliminate it is just share 2 or 3 things with them, realize that, hey, they're not going to go forward, and then you can train your mind to let go. But if you keep pressuring and pressuring and pressuring, that's going to be your own craving. So you would like to let that go so that you can continue to make progress and progress closer and closer to enlightenment. Okay, so we have a question here coming in on Facebook. Sir, what is complacency? Is it not content mind which contend with what is? Complacency is where you have dullness or lethargic condition, where you're uninterested or unmotivated, unwilling to take your effort and apply energy towards accomplishing some individual task. So it's the opposite of motivation and enthusiasm or initiative. Complacency would be to be like lackluster and indifferent. So if you don't have diligence or determination or dedication, the mind's going to be complacent. And when there's complacency setting in, that means you're unmotivated to take action to accomplish anything in life potentially. So as it relates to the teachings of the Buddha, someone who has complacency, they're not interested in learning, they're not interested in meditating, they're not willing to develop their practice. And you can go through bouts of complacency as you're learning the teachings even. You can be 1, 2, 3 years into your development of your life practice and go through periods of complacency. And wherever you see that complacency arise, you would like to take care of it right away, because the longer you allow the mind to be complacent, the harder it is to get the mind out of complacency. So if you allow it to dwell in that lackluster, dull state, that laziness will set in, and then it's harder to get the mind out of that. So you would like to maintain your enthusiasm, motivation, understanding that you're going to need to have rest and relaxation at different times, but you would like to ensure that you're not allowing this complacency to set in, and that you stay motivated, that you have initiative and enthusiasm to accomplish forward progress on the path to enlightenment, but also in other aspects of your life, whether it's your career, your family life, your social life, or other things like this as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else, so I'm just going to move on to the next chapter. It looks like Kushi would like to read this one. Go ahead, Kushi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. Noble truth is not impossible to know. The noble ones are plenty. There are not only 100 vacha or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male ordained practitioners, my disciples, who by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, experience, here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. There are not only 100 vacha or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female ordained practitioners, my disciples, who by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge experience, here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. There are not only 100 vacha or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, leading lives of celibacy, who with the destruction of 5 lower fetters will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm and there attain final nibbana, final enlightenment, without ever returning from that world. There are not only 100 vacha or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more male household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, enjoying sensual pleasures, who carry out my instruction, respond to my advice, have gone beyond doubt, become free from confusion, gained courage, and become independent of others in the teacher's teachings. There are not only 100 vacha or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, leading lives of celibacy, who with the destruction of 5 lower fetters will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm and there attain final nibbana, final enlightenment without ever returning from that world. There are not only 100 vacha, but or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more female household practitioners, my disciples, clothed in white, enjoying sensual pleasures, who carry out my instruction, respond to my advice, have gone beyond doubt, become free from confusion, gain courage, and become independent of others in the teacher's teachings.
All right. Thank you, Kushi. So here the Buddha is talking about the vast quantity of people who are learning from him and also the quality of their mind too. These first two paragraphs, he's talking about male and female ordained practitioners who have actually attained enlightenment. Where he's talking about here, where he says, now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. He's talking about the elimination of all the 10 fetters, because we refer to them as fetters or taints or pollutions of mind. Some people refer to them as defilements. So here he's talking about male and female ordained practitioners that have attained enlightenment. And this is really helpful for you to be able to understand, because you'll find certain people who will write books or who will talk as teachers, whether they're ordained teachers, whether they're at a temple or what have you, that will tell you that females are unable to attain enlightenment. And this is untrue. You can see here that the Buddha taught female practitioners and they attained enlightenment. So if you ever run across anything that tells you that a female is unable to attain enlightenment, this is completely untrue. The way that a male mind and a female mind work is exactly the same in terms of craving, anger, and ignorance, or the 10 fetters. It's all the same. In terms of what's in somebody's mind is going to be different, each individual between males and females, and even within males and within females, we have different things that we are interested in, certain personality characteristics and things like this. But in terms of how the mind functions related to the natural laws of existence, it's the same between a male and a female. And that's why the Buddha taught both males and females, because they can get to enlightenment. And he also taught household practitioners. There's some people that will tell you that a household practitioner can't get to enlightenment, which is untrue. Here, the Buddha is talking about male and female ordained practitioners that have attained enlightenment. Here, he's talking about male household practitioners and female household practitioners who have either attained a third stage of enlightenment. That's what this paragraph is talking about, when he's talking about will reappear spontaneously in the heavenly realm and then attain enlightenment from there. This is a non-returner, someone who's not returning back to the human realm and will attain enlightenment. This is someone in the third stage of enlightenment. Here in a moment, we're going to be reading a chapter where the Buddha is talking about anybody and everybody can get to enlightenment in terms of human beings or heavenly beings. Here, he's just focusing on ordained practitioners who enlightened and household practitioners that are either in the third stage of enlightenment, or here, these individuals could either be in the first or second stage of enlightenment that he's talking about here, depending on some of the other qualities of their mind. And he's talking about that in relationship to males and females. The Buddha never taught that everybody has to become ordained in order to get to enlightenment. If that was the case, who would ever run the world? If the entire world was ordained, there would be nobody to drive a taxi or nobody to fly an airplane, or of course those things didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, but there were businesses and shops and things like this. You can actually get to enlightenment as a household practitioner. During the lifetime of the Buddha, it was a lot more challenging, which you're going to see one of the chapters that we're going to explore today, that the Buddha talks about this, and he talks about how it is more challenging for a household practitioner to get to enlightenment during his lifetime. And even now, it's more challenging for a household practitioner to get to enlightenment than an ordained practitioner. But in terms of a household practitioner during the lifetime of the Buddha and a household practitioner now, you actually have a much better opportunity to get to enlightenment now as a household practitioner than you did even during the lifetime of the Buddha. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, household practitioners were really busy and occupied with basic tasks in order to just sustain their life. If you think about getting water to your house 2,500 years ago, it would take 1 or 2 days of constantly carrying buckets back and forth between the well and your house. And you might have to do that 2 or 3 times a week in order to get water to your actual house. or to have food to eat each day. You would have to plow your fields, fertilize your fields. You'd need to plant seeds. You need to take care of those seeds. You would need to harvest the food. You need to bring it in and take care of it and process it and cook it and prepare it and eat it. There's just an enormous amount of work that went into just sustaining your life, these types of tasks and others as well. Where today we just walk over to a faucet, we turn it, and boom, we've got water right away. Or in terms of food or clothing or other things that we might need, they're readily accessible to us. In fact, we've improved upon society in that regard so much that we tend to fill up our time in the unenlightened state with all kinds of erroneous things that are unbeneficial. Whether we're searching social media and just scrolling on that kind of thing, or just mindlessly watching certain videos or other things that we might do in the unenlightened state, if you start clearing some of those things out and eliminating your cravings, desires, attachments, you'll find that you have an enormous amount of time to do things like meditate, to study the teachings of the Buddha, to come to classes, to read books, to consult with your teacher and get help, that you can also spend time with your family as well. So there's nothing wrong with Facebook, there's nothing wrong with YouTube, there's nothing wrong with digesting content in these kinds of ways, but you need to look at the quality of the content that you're digesting through these different channels. That if you're just mindlessly looking at things, then this is going to be unbeneficial to your life. So if you start clearing out some of those unbeneficial things, you'll find that you actually have a significant amount of time in your life to do things like developing your life practice, which they didn't necessarily have that luxury during the lifetime of the Buddha because they were just so busy taking care of basic tasks in order to sustain their life, where we've really optimized that in today's society. So if you guys have any questions on any of the aspects of this particular chapter, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Kushi has a question. Go ahead, Kushi.
What does it mean when Buddha is saying that they are born spontaneously in heavenly realm?
Yeah, so the way that some formless beings come into existence is it's a spontaneous existence where there is a cause and effect, that because an individual has craving in the mind, there's going to be rebirth, and then based on the condition of the mind, the Gamma is going to determine which realm you're reborn into. But it's a spontaneous birth. It's like instantaneous, rather than like what we experience in the human realm, where there's like a 9-month gestation period, and then there's a labor, and then we're born into the world, and then we gradually grow as an infant. This is like a gradual birth that comes to be, where a spontaneous birth in a formless realm, it can happen instantaneous in these situations. So that's what he means by spontaneous rebirth into the heavenly realm. And by the way, while we're talking about this, because the next book that we're going to be going into, volume 11, is all about the cycle of rebirth and the realms of existence. The only reason why the Buddha really taught the cycle of rebirth, I mean, there's multiple reasons, but the primary reason that you might need to understand the cycle of rebirth, and again, you're not believing it, you're learning, reflecting, and practicing to be able to see the truth for yourself, is that as you're learning and practicing the core central teachings to get to enlightenment, and you're lifting out the pollution of your mind, it's not uncommon for an individual to have vivid memories of their past lives and observe those past lives. It's not uncommon for you to experience communication from beings in all these various realms. The hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the heavenly realm, and of course animal and human as well. And you can start to even observe, in some cases, beings from the hell realm, afflicted spirit realm, and heavenly realm. Even though they're formless, they can sometimes appear to an individual whose mind is less polluted. And if you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth and you started experiencing these types of things, you might think you're going insane. So by understanding the cycle of rebirth and the true reality of what's truly happening in this continuous rebirth, this is one of the benefits, is that if you start experiencing vivid memories of maybe getting murdered or having sexual abuse or any of these other things, and you know these things didn't happen in this life, then you don't need to allow it to shake up the mind, because you know that this was in a past life. So there's things like deja vu and other things that you can look at to be able to independently confirm the cycle of rebirth. You can look at 4 or 6-year-old children who have never seen a piano, and they can put their hands on a piano and they can play masterful piano, even though they've never trained in it ever in this life. These are residual memories that are from previous lives. And you can have people that are even 20 or 30 or 40 that have never trained in any particular type of skill, but they have expert ability in this life, even though they've never trained in that whatsoever. You can look at countless details that are all around you that you might not have paid attention to, or that you might have just pushed aside to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. And this is really helpful for you so that you realize that the overall problem that you're really experiencing is being stuck in this continuous cycle over and over and over again. And when you see some of these animalistic instincts come up in the unenlightened mind, you can recognize them as animalistic conditioning of the consciousness rather than human conduct that you would aspire to conduct, that you would like to become a better and better human being while you're in this human realm so that you can get to enlightenment and escape this constant rebirth and this cycle. Whereas if you retain the conditioning of the animal consciousness while you're in the human realm, when you die, there's a very good chance that you'll be reborn back into the lower realms. But if you can identify those types of behaviors like killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and things like this that are pervasive in the animal realm, they're also pervasive in the unenlightened mind within the human realm. So even though an individual has a human consciousness, their mind can be conditioned based on these countless births in the animal realm. And now, being in the human realm, they still function very much like an animal. And you would like to evolve beyond that so that you can become a better and better human being and escape that conditioning of the animal consciousness, becoming a better human being and getting closer and closer to the enlightened mind. So these are some of the reasons why the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth, so that you can see this clearly and then make wise decisions to move beyond the cycle of rebirth and escape it. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So since there's been some more people that have joined us in Zoom, I'll just remind you guys, you can read these chapters at any time. Just raise your hand electronically and you can volunteer to read any of these chapters as we go. So this is chapter 4, and this one is titled, With the Teachings in Yourselves as Your Refuge. Now remember, as I taught from the beginning of the class, refuge is protection. And what the Buddha is talking about when he's talking about a refuge is protecting the mind. And what do you need to do in order to protect the mind from these strong feelings of discontentedness? But have I not already declared, Ananda, that we must be parted, separated, and severed from all who are dear and agreeable to us? How, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be conditioned and subject to disintegration, not disintegrate. That is impossible. It is just as if the largest branch would break off a great tree standing possessed of heartwood. So too, Ananda, in the great monk community standing possessed of heartwood, Sariputta has attained final nibbana, or final enlightenment. How, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be conditioned and subject to disintegration, not disintegrate. That is impossible. Therefore, Ananda, reside with yourselves as your own island, with yourselves as your own refuge, with no other refuge. Reside with the teachings as your island, with the teachings as your refuge, with no other refuge. And how, Ananda, does a monk reside with himself as his own island, with himself as his own refuge, with no other refuge, with the teachings as his island, with the teachings as his refuge, with no other refuge? Here, Ananda, a monk resides reflecting on the body as body, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Those monks, Ananda, either now or after I am gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, with themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with the teachings as their island, with the teachings as their refuge, with no other refuge. It is these monks, Ananda, who will be for me topmost of those determined on the training. So we're going to be talking about chapter 4 here. This is where the Buddha is saying to reside with the teachings as your own refuge. And here, what he's describing is for you to develop your own life practice, that this is your own independent journey to enlightenment. It's not that you can get enlightenment from somebody else. It's not that the teacher can give you enlightenment. It's not that your parents can give you enlightenment. This is your own independent journey to enlightenment, but you need teachers and guides to be able to help you in order to be able to get to enlightenment. But you need to always maintain the understanding that it's your own dedication, your own diligence that is going to be able to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment by yourself. So sometimes people confuse what the Buddha is describing here in order for them to think that they can get to enlightenment by themselves. He's not saying that you can get to enlightenment by yourself. He's saying to use the teachings to be able to then get to enlightenment, to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. Here he's talking to Ananda. Ananda is one of his closest students, and Ananda was with the Buddha throughout pretty much his entire teaching career for 45 years. And one of his other close students was Sariputta. And Sariputta got to enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha, and he died before the Buddha. And Ananda is essentially talking to the Buddha because Ananda was oftentimes attached to people. Sariputta he was attached to based on what we see in the teachings. He was also attached to the Buddha himself at one point, that you can see that in the teachings. But the Buddha is explaining to him that these things are all impermanent, that because we're born, we're going to experience sickness, aging, and death, that it's not possible for us to be here permanently, that we're going to experience this arising, this changing, and passing away. Because he says here, may what be born come to be conditioned, subject to disintegration, not disintegrate. That is impossible. Meaning those things that are subject to the universal truth of impermanence, it's not possible for them to not be impermanent, because all these conditioned objects are impermanent. So it's impossible for them to not be impermanent. They have to disintegrate. They have to be eliminated, because as things arise, change, and fade away, being subject to the universal truth of impermanence, they're going to experience this continuous coming and going in terms of impermanence and not experiencing this fixed state. So a human being that's born, they're going to experience sickness, aging, and death. They're not going to be able to be here permanently. So he's helping Ananda to be able to understand that it's impossible for these things to be permanent. And then he's talking about here that Sariputta is like this heartwood. If you look at the teachings of the Buddha and the analogies that he's using analogies of things that people would have understood during their lifetime, that people would have understood farming, and people would have understood things like what is heartwood. What heartwood is if you take a tree, there's the outer bark, there's the inner bark, there's the wood that's closer to the bark, and then there's the core of the tree, which is called the heartwood. This is like the highest quality wood. It's the most dense, and it's the most high quality part of the tree. So if you're going to be making a high quality item, like a high quality piece of furniture or some other thing like this, you would like to use the highest quality wood, or the heartwood. So the Buddha is describing that Sariputta was essentially this heartwood, that he was a very well practiced ordained practitioner who attained enlightenment, or here they're talking about final nibbana. What final nibbana is when somebody attains enlightenment during this life and then they die, we don't call it death, we call it final enlightenment or final nibbana. Because you can get to a point where you've eliminated all the cravings, desires, attachments in the mind, and your mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, as I always talk about with the enlightened mind. But there's one thing that's happening that you can't eliminate as long as you're alive, which is the body and the mind are together. You can't eliminate that as long as you're alive. So you're still going to experience some painful feelings in terms of physical pain. Like what we studied last week in volume 9, that an enlightened being is still going to experience physical pain. It's going to be different, though, than when you were in the unenlightened state. In the unenlightened state, you're experiencing the physical pain, but you also experience the mental anguish that goes along with it. And it heightens the physical pain. It makes it feel more intense. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll still experience physical pain, but you won't experience the mental anguish. So using that example of stumping your toe, as an unenlightened being, you're going to feel the physical sensation of that. And then as an unenlightened being, you're going to feel the mental anguish where you might get angry and frustrated and irritated, and it heightens the pain of stumping your toe. But as an enlightened being, if you stump your toe, you're going to feel the physical pain, but it's going to be very muted compared to when you were unenlightened, because the mind is no longer experiencing that mental anguish. And even before you get to enlightenment, you'll experience some of this because you will have eliminated certain cravings, desires, attachments along the way. So you can experience a significant reduction in physical pain as you get closer and closer to enlightenment, because you're no longer attached to the physical body, wanting it to permanently be comfortable. You realize that it's going to occasionally be uncomfortable, and that's impermanence. So this final enlightenment is where the mind and the body separate, and now there's no longer even physical pain anymore. So that's why we call it final enlightenment rather than death. So the Buddha experienced final enlightenment. He didn't experience death, because once you attain enlightenment, you are now experiencing what's called the deathless element. Once you get to enlightenment in this life, and the Buddha got to enlightenment at the age of 35, he will no longer experience death anymore after that. From that point of the age of 35, when he was enlightened, what he's going to experience at the breakup of the body and the mind is he's going to experience final enlightenment. It's not death. Because with death, you're experiencing continuous rebirth over and over and over and over again. But with final enlightenment, you're not experiencing rebirth in any of the 5 realms after that. So the Buddha taught for all this time, for 45 years, and he's reminding Ananda, okay, that you should reside with yourself as your own protection, your own refuge. That's what's going to protect your mind, is developing your understanding of the teachings. The teachings are what's going to be your refuge, because if you can train your mind and get it protected from these strong feelings of discontentedness, that's what's going to ultimately help eliminate all these strong feelings. And then the way that he's explaining to be able to do that is to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are how you reside with yourself as your own refuge. Because with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you're going to understand the life cycle that discontentedness goes through, and then you'll be able to take action to actually fix the mind and retrain the mind and rewire the mind. I teach the 4 foundations of mindfulness in various classes and courses and retreats that I teach, but let me just give you guys a little bit of it here. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. These are the 4 things that your mind needs to become aware of or mindful of. You need to be able to observe these 4 things. The bodily sensations are one thing, the feelings are another thing, the condition of the mind is something else, and then the mental objects. What the bodily sensations are, this is where prior to you getting angry or frustrated or irritated, or even those pleasant feelings that are conditioned feelings, there's going to be some bodily sensation. With anger or frustration or these other types of feelings like that, oftentimes the bodily sensations are things like tingling in the body, coming up the chest, tightening in the chest, maybe some pain around the heart, maybe some tightening in the throat, maybe some heat in the face, maybe some pressure in the skull. These are all bodily sensations cluing you in that, hey, you're about to get angry. Hey, you're about to get frustrated. It's kind of like an early warning system to be able to help you realize that, hey, you can take action right here with these bodily sensations and save your mind from having to experience this conditioned feeling of anger. You can cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. It's kind of like if you were in the boat out in the middle of the ocean, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat, because once it comes into the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. So if you can prevent the water from ever coming into the boat, you've saved yourself. Now you can be able to take this nice journey across the ocean. So the same thing is true as if you can observe and notice those bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the pleasant feelings, painful feelings are neither painful nor pleasant, and you can cut it off and let it go there, you've just saved your mind from ever needing to experience the conditioned feeling. And now you're rewiring the mind to no longer have conditioned feelings. So this is what you would like to be able to do. But of course, as you're training, you're not going to be able to do that every single time. As you're training your mind and transitioning, you are going to experience conditioned feelings. So from there, you'd like to try to cut them off and let them go there. Because if you don't, it's then going to affect the condition of your mind. If you've ever been angry for a few hours or a few days or a week or two, agitated or annoyed, that's the condition of the mind. You didn't understand it, cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. You didn't understand it, cut it off and let it go as a feeling. So now it's affecting the condition of the mind for many hours or days or a week or so. And then it's going to feed the mental objects. And in this example, it's ill will, which is like a container. It's a deeply rooted container in the mind that's getting fed over and over and over again. So you would like to revert the mind. You would like to rewire the mind. You would like to train the mind to no longer experience this. So if you can cut off and let go of the discontentedness that is arising as a bodily sensation, eventually you will have restrained the mind so many times that all the cravings that are producing these discontent feelings to arise will have been eliminated, and you won't even experience the arising of any kind of discontent feelings any longer. So it's breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to help you to develop these 4 foundations of mindfulness and be able to restrain the mind. And it's practicing generosity, where you're giving and sharing more than is required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And you're going to need the other steps of the Eightfold Path as well to be able to help you. But this is just a little bit of a window into what I've taught in other programs and so forth. Because if you haven't studied with me in the foundational programs, you might not have learned the 4 foundations of mindfulness with me. But these are things that have been recorded, and there's books and there's classes and courses and retreats that I teach where you can learn this in much more detail, because you're going to need this to be able to get to enlightenment. That's how you remove your craving and displeasure. That's how you eliminate all the discontent feelings, is by training the mind in many different tools and techniques. But it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness that are going to really propel you to be able to drastically eliminate your discontentedness. If you start to become aware of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and you can notice each individual foundation, the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects, at this point, you're really close to enlightenment. If you can notice them when they're arising, and you can cut them off and let them go, you can probably get to enlightenment within the next 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. And while this sounds like maybe a long time, that's very insignificant amount of time compared to the countless rebirths that you've experienced over many, 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 many lives. 1, 2, 3 years, that's like a blink of an eye. So if you can get to the point where you develop your practice, that you can observe those bodily sensations, this early warning system, and cut off and let go there, then you're really close to enlightenment at that point. And that's why the Buddha is saying, now you are your own island, because you have cultivated enough wisdom to now to be able to cut off and let go of any discontentedness that is arising. And you can get to this point where your mind is now liberated and free from these strong feelings. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, we have a question on Facebook here from Mayu Lee. It looks like it's a pretty long one, so I might need to break it down a little bit. Regarding rebirth, since cravings and clingings are the memory that transfers to the new body during rebirth, does that mean we can only have memory of what we were attached to at the time of death? You're not understanding 100% here, Mayu Lee, so let me clarify that before I go on further here. So at the time of death, whatever the condition of the mind is, then if there's craving in the mind, then what transfers to the new mind, not to the new body, but to the new mind, is your cravings and any residual memories. These are 2 different things. So you can have certain cravings that are transfer, like your cravings will transfer, but also any residual memories. The memories aren't necessarily cravings. So these are 2 different things. So these transfer to the mind, and now you can remember those things in your current life. And it's not just what you were attached to at the time of death, or I'm sorry, in terms of the cravings, desires, attachments, yes, that's what you're going to experience, whatever is in the mind at the time of death. Not necessarily what you're craving in that exact moment, but what is inside the mind. If you think about the mind like a cardboard box, and you've got all these various cravings and all these various memories, when that cardboard box is done and over with and there's a new cardboard box, the craving and residual memories move into this new cardboard box. And now you have the same cravings from the previous life, and you'll have certain residual memories from that previous life as well. What about the Buddha teaching that we cultivate during this lifetime but have not reached the first stage of enlightenment? Will we have memory of the teachings? Yes, if you train in this life, or if you have trained in previous lives, now in this life, you're going to have residual memories of those teachings. He teaches, and you can see for yourself if you ever see your past lives and know that you were learning these teachings in the past life, you'll see that it's a lot easier for you to get to enlightenment or make progress in this life because you've learned and practiced in a previous life. You don't necessarily need to know that, but for example, if you're finding it somewhat straightforward to learn and practice the teachings in this life, this could be because you learn and practice the teachings in a previous life. But also, if you're finding it very challenging and very cumbersome to learn the teachings in this life, this can be because you didn't learn them in a previous life. Regardless of what situation that is, you're learning and practicing now, and that's what you would like to do. But this helps you to understand why some people find it very straightforward to be able to learn and practice the teachings and make ready progress. And this also helps you to understand why some people have more of a challenge. So no matter what category you fall into, you can understand that this is all based on previous life and what you did in a previous life. And if you're learning and practicing these teachings now, it could be that you learned and practiced in a previous life, and now you found the teachings again in this life. And that's somewhat common for individuals. Or only once we reach the first stage, then we are able to remember and continue the teachings next life, given that we are reborn into human or heavenly realms. So when you experience your observation of past lives, it's not necessarily only when you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You can experience that at other times. I actually had memories as early as 8 years old of past life. I didn't know about it at that time, that that's what it was, but that was the earliest memory I have of a previous life and things that happened in a previous life. So you can have these memories all throughout your life, not necessarily knowing what they are. And then ultimately, when I got into kind of like about 44 years old, that's where I started having really profound memories of past lives. And I started connecting all these things that were transpiring throughout my entire life. And I was able to see that these were all experiences from a past life. So you don't necessarily need to be in the first stage of enlightenment to experience observation of past lives. And then you mentioned here that then you're able to remember the continued teachings. Even if you don't get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's the ability to retain some of the wisdom of these teachings if you're reborn, right? So let's just say you learn these teachings and you don't even get to the jhanas, say, for example, and then you die. There's the potential that you're going to have residual memories from that experience in your next life as well. So it's not like all is lost if you don't even get to the jhanas or the first stage of enlightenment. Getting to the first stage of enlightenment is pretty significant, and a lot of people put a lot of effort and energy and thought into getting to the first stage of enlightenment. I would encourage people to focus on enlightenment itself and make their way through the jhanas and all the way to the fourth stage of enlightenment. But you can retain memories in your mind, these residual memories of these teachings, even without having accomplished any of those four jhanas or one of the four stages of enlightenment. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. Here, this one is titled, Liberation of Mind is the Heartwood. Here, I'll read this to you guys. So, this holy life, monks, does not have gain, honor, and praise for its benefit, or the attainment of virtue or moral conduct for its benefit, or the attainment of concentration for its benefit, or wisdom and vision for its benefit, But it is this unshakable liberation of mind that is the goal of this holy life, its heartwood and its end. Suppose a man needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, came to a great tree standing possessed of heartwood, and cutting off only its heartwood, would take it away, knowing it was heartwood. Then a man with good sight, seeing him, might say, "This good man knew the heartwood, the sapwood, the inner bark, the outer bark, and the twigs and leaves. Thus, while needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, he came to a great tree standing possessed of heartwood, and, cutting off only its heartwood, he took it away, knowing it was heartwood. Whatever it was this good man had to make with heartwood, his purpose will be served." So again, here the Buddha is using this analogy of heartwood, which is the core of the tree and the very good quality, high quality aspect of the tree. And the Buddha is saying, okay, what's the real goal of this path to enlightenment? And here he shares it with you, the unshakable liberation of mind. That's enlightenment. That's the ultimate goal of the path to enlightenment. It's not this gain, honor, and praise. Sometimes people might think that, okay, let me go get ordained, or let me start learning the teachings of the Buddha so I will look really good in front of my friends or in front of my family or in front of society. That's not the goal of this path to enlightenment, because that would be conceit. And if you have conceit, then the mind is not yet enlightened. So your goal isn't to have this gain, honor, and praise. And it's not even to attain this moral conduct, even though you're going to be practicing a certain amount of moral conduct as part of your journey to enlightenment. You'll experience a significant amount of moral conduct that you'll be experiencing and being able to practice, which is going to improve the quality of your mind. That you're going to see that as part of your journey to enlightenment, that you'll experience improved moral conduct. But that's not the ultimate benefit. You're also going to experience a certain amount of concentration as part of your journey to enlightenment, that the mind's going to be more focused, more concentrated, having deep memory and clarity of mind. And while you're experiencing that benefit, that's not the ultimate goal. That's a quality of mind that you experience as a result of eliminating the pollution of the mind, but that's not the ultimate goal. And then you're also going to have this significant amount of wisdom and vision. When the Buddha is talking about wisdom and vision, he's talking about wisdom of the path to enlightenment, the vision to be able to see the natural laws of existence very clearly and to be able to know what it takes to actually get to enlightenment. So he's saying that's not even the benefit. That's not even what you're going for. But of course, you're going to be cultivating this along the way, and you're going to be experiencing that along the way. The ultimate goal of this path to enlightenment is liberation, the elimination of these strong feelings, where your mind is no longer experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, and other discontent feelings. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So this is chapter 6. I'm going to take a little drink of water. Halftime. Oh, Koshi's going to read. Thank you, Koshi. Appreciate that.
Anyone can produce nibbana, enlightenment. And what ananda are the 6 classes? Here, someone of the black class produces a black state. Second, someone of black class produces a white state. Third, someone of the black class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. Fourth, then someone of the white class produces a black state. Fifth, someone of the white class produces a white state. And sixth, someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. First, and how is it ananda that someone of the black class produces a black state? Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers, one that is poor with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of black class produces a black state. Second, and how is it Ananda that someone of black class produces a white state? Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers, one that is poor with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. In such consequence, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. It is in such a way that someone of black class produces white state. Third, and how Ananda is that someone of black class produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or flower scavengers, one that is poor with little food and drink, and that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his hair and beard, he puts on ochre robes and goes forth from the household life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he abandons the five hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then, with his mind well established in the four foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the seven factors of enlightenment and produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of black class produces nibbana, which is neither black nor white. Fourth, and how is it, Ananda, that someone of white class produces a black state? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Kathia family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of white class produces a black state. Fifth, and how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces a white state? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Kathia family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain. And he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces a white state. Sixth, and how is it, Ananda, that someone with the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Katia family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain. And he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garland, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his hair and beard, he puts on ochre robes and goes forth from household life into homelessness. When he is thus gone forth, he abandons the five hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then his mind well established in the four foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the seven factors of enlightenment and produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. This Ananda are the six classes.
Thank you so much, Kushi. So here the Buddha
Thank
is,
you.
yes, thank you. So here the Buddha is explaining that anyone can attain enlightenment or nibbana. And he's talking here about people who are moving from kind of a family who lacks resources to either, moving into unwholesome conduct, which would go to the hell realm. He's talking about a family or an individual as part of a family who was born with a lack of resources, moving to wholesome moral conduct and improving the condition of their mind, moving to this white state, which would be to be reborn in the heavenly realm. And then he's talking about someone who's born into a family who lacks resources, who actually obtains enlightenment. And then he's talking here also about individuals who are born into an affluent family who have significant amount of resources that move towards hell, that they are lacking in moral conduct. And then he's talking about individuals who have affluency and significant amount of resources who moves to heavenly realm. And then the same thing, an affluent family with significant resources that attain enlightenment. And the reason why this is really important is because during the lifetime of the Buddha, and maybe even now, there's people who think that depending on where you're born, this is going to depend on what type of life that you live. That if you're born with lacking resources, you might think that your life is destined for miserable things. Or if you are born into a family that has significant amount of resources, you might think that you're destined for wonderful things. But what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that it doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't matter what family you're born into. It's about your wisdom and your actions that are going to determine what happens as you experience this life and beyond, if you end up experiencing rebirth. That it's based on what you do in this life. And you're going to need wisdom in order to cultivate the mind and train the mind and be able to get to this improved moral conduct. So if you're born into a family that lacks resources, you can move through and beyond any of that, but you could also be reborn in hell if you didn't end up cultivating your mind and producing improved the decision making. So it's the same thing with the affluent class or an individual who is born into a wealthy family, that they can also be reborn in hell, heavenly realm, or attain enlightenment. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, people who were rich and affluent, they were called the noble class, and they were walking around with their right shoulder exposed when they would go outside in public. And this is how people knew that you were of a rich, wealthy family, is that you had your right shoulder exposed. And if you were of a class of family who lacked resources, that's not the way that you would dress, so people would look at you in one particular way or another. But when people would come to join the Buddha in order to be his student, and they would wear the orange robes, he would have them expose their right shoulder, no matter what family you came from, whether you came from a family that lacked resources or a family that had significant resources. He considered anyone who was learning and deeply practicing and improving their wisdom and moral conduct, he considered them to be noble. So they exposed their right shoulder. And even today, this is how monks will dress as they go about the world. So here you can see the Buddha's talking that anybody can experience enlightenment. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Koshi, go ahead.
I have a question that when we are intending to develop the four foundations of mindfulness, and it's not possible to cut off the feeling or the bodily sensation, then can it be cut off while it is in the mind? Of course, in mental objects, it couldn't be cut off because it is feeding the mental objects. But how can, because that is the mind is after a body feeling, and then there is the mind. So can it be cut off when it is in the mind, when it is stayed a bit long term? So, and how can it be developed? And then other part of the question is like how to develop 7 factors of enlightenment after developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you can reflect on that a bit. Thank you.
Sure. So, of course, as you're training, you're not going to be able to catch it every time as a bodily sensation. It's going to become a feeling, and it's going to become where it's affecting the condition of the mind, and it's maybe even feeding these mental objects to a certain degree. But what you're looking to do is you're trying to develop your practice to the point where you can catch it sooner and sooner. It's kind of like a wild bush that you'd like to trim it back and trim it back and trim it back sooner and sooner so that you can get down to the roots. The roots are the mental objects, and you'd like to uproot this out of the mind so that now the wild bush no longer grows. So you need to become more and more aware sooner and sooner, and that takes time. So it's the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity that's going to be able to help you to do that. But as it becomes a feeling, yes, you can cut it off there. You can cut it off as a condition of the mind. And as you're not able to do that, and it is becoming a conditioned feeling, and it is affecting the condition of the mind, you just continue to stay dedicated to your breathing mindfulness meditation, your generosity, and doing the redirection of the mind in daily life so that you can get better and better at letting go. And over time, then the mind gets more and more trained to be able to let go. And it's just going to take time for that to occur. The way that I think about it is like if my fist is the unenlightened mind and it's running forward in life, and then you've got this like parallel process of your breathing mindfulness meditation, your generosity, and all the other things on the Eightfold Path, your mind is like lurching forward and running forward in this unenlightened state, experiencing all this discontentedness, and you're trying to slowly, consistently, gradually build up this parallel process where you're developing your Eightfold Path to eventually kind of get in front of this mind and envelop it. And now you've got control of the mind. But in the meantime, your mind's out there going like this, and your practice is kind of behind that. You haven't yet fully enveloped the mind because you're just starting to practice like in the last 1 year or so. So you're trying to continue to stay dedicated and diligent in that, knowing that you're headed in the right direction, knowing you're still going to experience these conditioned feelings and the condition of the mind and so forth. But eventually, when you put enough dedication and diligence and time into this, you'll envelop the mind and get in front of that. And now you'll have more control over the mind. So that's with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and you're developing that through breathing mindfulness meditation. So once you've developed the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment come in at the end of that, where you're starting to now experience the ability to see the bodily sensations, to then notice those feelings and the condition of the mind and the mental objects, because the 7 factors of enlightenment are to fine-tune the mind. While you might be aware of the 7 factors of enlightenment earlier than that, they really come into play once you really are looking to fine-tune the mind. Those 7 factors that you can study in Volume 1, Chapter 3, you'll see them in there. And what you learn is you learn about being able to observe the sluggish mind, because you need to be able to know that the mind is sluggish, and that's the condition of the mind, that you notice that the mind is sluggish, and now you need to practice the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy, and joy to lift it up. But then you can also notice with that mindfulness that the mind is excited in that excited state, and then you calm it down with the tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And you develop these by learning what they are, learning in what situations to apply them, and then applying them in those situations and seeing the effect that they have. So it's through practice of them that you actually develop them. So the meditations and all the other things you're learning is helping you to develop the 7 factors of enlightenment, but you actually really truly get the ability to practice them by practicing them in daily life. And you need to know what they are and know what they remedy so you can go in and fine tune the mind. One of the things that I don't think you've heard me share before is I think about your life practice, and when you first get on the path, it's like you're this big log, and now you're this big dense log, right? And now you would like to make this beautiful sculpture, and that's getting to enlightenment, having this beautiful sculpture. Well, when you first start, it's like you take an axe or a hatchet and you're chopping off these big chunks of wood. You're chopping off like wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. And you're chucking these off and you're trying to whittle this wood down. And now, after you've really developed your Eightfold Path and all these other factors, now it's starting to look something like somewhat of a figurine that you're starting to develop. And now you get out other tools that you're going to go in and start making this sculpture with. The 7 factors of enlightenment are like a little X-Acto knife that you're coming in and putting like the little wrinkles on the skin or the eyelashes. You're really fine-tuning the sculpture that you're creating of this big piece of wood. And that's what you're doing with the mind, is you're fine-tuning it with the 7 factors of enlightenment. And that's why you don't really need them until you already have developed the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because you need the ability to observe and notice with mindfulness the condition of the mind is either sluggish or excited. And that's when you invoke either the first 3, or actually it's number 2 through 4, which is investigation, energy, and joy, or you invoke the tranquility, concentration, equanimity, which is 5, 6, and 7. So that's how you would develop it, is first develop in meditation the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then as you got that underway, now you can start looking at the 7 factors of enlightenment to understand what they are and how you invoke them. And then you'll actually be able to do it because you've developed the mindfulness to be able to observe the condition of the mind. Okay, let me see if there's any more questions here. Okay. All right, Koshi, I'm not sure if that's a question or if you'd like to read the next chapter.
I have a question. So, okay, I get it. And 7 factors of enlightenment are just like concept right now. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about generosity, that like how can it be practiced in a way that mind does not produce conceit or personal existence view around it, because what I feel like right now when I practice generosity, even if it is a right thing to do, there is some confidence built through that external action or through that external thing, and there are some feelings produced from that, and then that feelings don't last, it just fades away. So I know that I think I'm not practicing generosity in the right way. So how can it be done correctly? Sure. And if you can recommend me some chapters from other volumes, then too I can look into it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. This is a great question. So as you're practicing generosity, you need to be able to give and share more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, where you're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. But what you might notice is conceit is arising or pleasant feelings are arising as a result of this condition of practicing generosity. So it comes back to the Eightfold Path of that mental discipline section. And that's why that's a foundational teaching, that if you are practicing right mindfulness, which is awareness of mind, which it sounds like you are because you wouldn't know that that conceit or those pleasant feelings are there, but then you apply right effort to cut it off. So as you're getting ready to put together an offering, if you notice excitement arising, you notice enthusiasm and these conditioned feelings of happiness, you got to cut it off and cut it off. So maybe as you're putting your gift together, or whatever it is that you're doing, you might need to restrain the mind in that situation. If you're noticing conditioned feelings or conceit or anything like that, you're not interested in going forward with that. So you'd like to restrain the mind and pull it back. And that's how you're going to ultimately eliminate the cravings that are underlying that are producing this either conceit or these pleasant feelings. So it all comes back to that Eightfold Path and the mental discipline. When you're practicing generosity, you would like the mind to be calm as you're making the offering. You would like it to be calm and confident. So before you make your offering, the mind should be joyful. While you're giving, it should be calm and confident. And then after you give, it should still be joyful. And this joy that you're experiencing, it's unconditioned joy. So if you're not experiencing any of those things, or if you're experiencing something else other than those things, then that is the arising of some feeling or some aspect of the mind that is either a mental object like conceit or something else, and you would like to cut it off and let it go. So since you know the ideal way to practice generosity is to be joyful before and after giving and calm and confident while you're giving, if you see anything else creeping into the mind other than those things, if there's something else besides those things there, that's where with mindfulness you notice it, and then with right effort you restrain the mind and pull it back and don't allow the mind to do that. And it's going to take multiple times for you to do that. It's not going to be just, okay, you just heard it from me and you're going to be able to go out and do it. You're going to need to practice generosity regularly. Every single day you would like to be practicing some generosity, because you can practice generosity with just 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds of a little action here or there in some situations. So the more that you practice generosity as you can, then you'll get better and better at practicing it. Whereas if you're only doing it like once a week or once a month, you're not having as much opportunity to be able to practice generosity and train the mind in this way. So it looks like, Francis, you have a question as well, or maybe you would like to read. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question pertaining to what you just mentioned about performing generosity. For me, I do it with good heart, with joy and delight in offering. And after I've done that, I also feel joyful. But after that, I will just let it go, and I tell myself that's already in the past. Let's just move on right now to something else and all that. So is that a right trend of thought? Could you please share your input?
Yeah, that's what you would like to do is be joyful before giving, where it's unconditioned joy, that you're putting thought into whatever generosity you're practicing, that you're calm and confident while you're practicing that generosity, and you're still joyful afterwards as well, that you don't have remorse, like I gave too much or I didn't give enough. This is like the remorse that the mind can experience if there hasn't been the practice of generosity, that maybe there's craving in there. So that's why you would like to look at the mind and observe it with mindfulness as you're practicing generosity. And then, as you say, when you make your offering, you just let it go, whatever it is, or whether you're just practicing regular generosity where you're opening the door for somebody at the store. You're just doing it because you know it's a wise thing to do, not because you want anything. And then when you're done, and you just move on, and you just realize, like, okay, this is the type of person that you're now becoming, that you can practice generosity, which is the opposite of selfishness. You're trying to eliminate the stain of selfishness, where whenever there's an opportunity for you to be generous, that you're able to do that, and then you do it. You ultimately get to the point where you don't even necessarily think about that, oh my goodness, now I need to practice generosity. Let me do this and this and this and this and this. Initially, you need to do that. But eventually, when you eliminate the cravings and clinging and the stain of selfishness, you're just a generous person with your time, effort, energy, and resources. You don't even need to think about it necessarily. You just do it because that's the character that you have become as this better and better human being, that without the pollution of your mind, having craving and clinging, then you just become a more and more generous person. And you do that from the middle way, as we've talked about before.
Okay, I got what you mentioned, but for me, it's just that because now I'm practicing generosity, I occasionally find myself in this eagerness, to perform generosity, starting with my own family members. And if I find occasions where I can contribute to people, I just go in and contribute and all that. So am I going through a craving process here, or is it a natural thing that I'm doing?
If you're eager to do it, that's a craving in there. So when you notice that you would like to restrain the mind and pull it back, this is something for Kushi too. Let's just say you're putting an offering together for somebody, maybe a teacher or a friend or a boss or something like that. If you're putting this offering together and you're feeling this eagerness to give it to them, then once you put your offering together, even though you were planning to give it to them that day or the next day, just let it sit there for like a week or two and don't give it to them. Allow the craving to be restrained, allow the mind to be restrained. So rather than allow the mind to lurch forward with that eagerness and that craving, sometimes what you need to do to restrain the mind is, even though you've assembled this offering, is just let it sit there and don't actually offer it. And that will help the mind to release its craving and clinging. And then maybe you give it to them after a week or two. And then the next time you make an offering to somebody like this, you notice the mind. Is there less craving and there's less clinging? Each time you do it, there should be less and less craving and clinging. And you might need to do this several times before your mind ultimately eliminates its eagerness. Oftentimes we think that eagerness is a good quality, but it's oftentimes coming from craving, desire, attachment. There's initiative and a willingness to do something in energy. This is the middle way. But the eagerness, that's got that longing, yearning in there, and that's what you're trying to eradicate from the mind.
Okay, well, one last question is pertaining to what just mentioned. In my area where I'm staying, that there are, on every first Saturday of the month, the monks will come on alms round, and I know of that schedule, and I made myself available to buy things or offer food to the monks when they go on the alms round. And for me, actually, I feel that I would like to do that, and I plan for it and all that. So all this planning and thinking and doing it and all that, is it craving, attachment? Is it? I just wanted to do it,
It's not whether you do it or not that determines if it's a craving, desire, attachment. It's what's going on in the mind. Is the mind obsessing about it? Is it longing and yearning for it? So that's what you would like to look at. It's not just about whether you do this action or not. It's about how the mind is experiencing it and relating to this action. So if you observe the mind and you notice that it's longing and yearning, then yes, it's a craving, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means that you need to train the mind of how to do it without craving, desire, attachment.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me check to see if we have anything else coming in. All right, I don't see anything. So let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter 7. I'll go ahead and read this unless somebody else in Zoom volunteers. So here, this one is titled The Humble. Now, Kunda, here, humbleness should be practiced by you. Others will be cruel. We should not be cruel here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will kill living beings. We shall abstain from killing living beings here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will take what is not given. We shall abstain from taking what is not given here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will be uncelibate. We shall be celibate here. Humbleness should be practiced thus. So this is like the whole entire discourse where the Buddha is explaining certain quality and how to actually practice. So I'm not going to read all of those things. I'm just going to read the core thing where he says, others speak falsehood. We will abstain from having false speech. Others will be malicious. We shall abstain from malicious speech. Others will be harsh. And we shall abstain from harsh speech. Others will have gossip. We will abstain from gossip. Others will have craving. We will not have craving. Others will have anger. We will not have anger. Others will have wrong view. We will have right view. Others will have wrong intention. We will have right intention. Others will have wrong speech. We shall have right speech. Wrong action, right action. Wrong livelihood, right livelihood. Wrong effort, right effort. Wrong mindfulness, right mindfulness. Wrong concentration, right concentration. Wrong wisdom, right wisdom. Wrong liberation, right liberation. Overcome by complacency, we will be free of complacency. Have restlessness and worry, we shall not be restless and worried. Others will be doubters, we will be beyond doubt. Others will have ill will, we will not have ill will. Others will be revengeful, we shall not be revengeful. Others will be insulting and disrespectful, we will not be insulting and disrespectful. Others will be domineering, we shall not be domineering here. Others will be jealous, we will not be jealous. Others will be materialistic, we will not be materialistic. Dishonorable, we will not be dishonorable. Untrustworthy, we shall not be untrustworthy. Others will be stubborn, we shall not be stubborn. Others will be arrogant, we shall not be arrogant. Difficult to guide, we will be easy to guide. Unwholesome friends, we shall have wholesome friends. Negligent, we shall be diligent. Without confidence, we shall have confidence. We'll see no danger of wrongdoing, we will see danger of wrongdoing. We'll be of little learning, we shall have great learning here. Be lazy, we shall be energetic. Unmindful, we shall establish mindfulness. Lack wisdom, we will possess wisdom. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Others will adhere to their own views, hold them forcefully, and relinquish, let go of them with difficulty. We shall not adhere to our own views or hold on to them forcefully, but shall relinquish them easily. Humbleness should be practiced thus. Okay, so this is a great discourse where the Buddha just goes down and lists format. Boom, 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 boom. Here are these unwholesome qualities of mind, and here's the wholesome quality to practice. And then he talks about this humbleness, because as you practice more and more of these wholesome qualities, the condition of your mind is going to be drastically improving. You're going to notice this focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. You're going to have wisdom beyond what other people around you have wisdom about. And you're going to be able to so easily do things where other people are really struggling with some of the most basic things in life, where you've transcended those things and cultivated wisdom. And oftentimes the mind can become conceited or arrogant when you see these qualities of mind that are improving in the way that you have this wisdom beyond what other people have. So while you're moving to these more and more wholesome qualities, it's important to maintain your humbleness, that you see everybody as being equal. So all of these things, you can see what are the unwholesome qualities and what are the wholesome qualities to practice. One of the things that I'll draw your attention to among all of these, and you can look at all of these and ask any questions that you like, but these two here, you don't typically see these frequently in the teachings of the Buddha. This is part of the tenfold path. What you learn in order to get to enlightenment is the eightfold path, but an enlightened being is going to be practicing the tenfold path. The tenfold path has two extra steps that you don't necessarily learn how to practice, like with right view, right intention, right speech, and others. There are specific teachings that you learn in order to practice that and bring your practice up to that level. Where with right wisdom and right liberation, these are actually the benefits of having practiced the Eightfold Path. That there's nothing for you to actually individually learn how to practice these. It's something that you will be experiencing as part of your journey to enlightenment. So if you practice the Eightfold Path closely, you will then experience right wisdom and right liberation. What right wisdom is where you have deep, profound wisdom of the path to enlightenment, and you can describe it with ease. That because you've cultivated the wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment, by the time you get to enlightenment, you will be practicing right wisdom. Where if anybody asked you a question about the path to enlightenment, you would be able to explain it with ease because you've deeply cultivated your practice and deeply cultivated the wisdom to then be able to explain it to somebody if they should ask. And then what right liberation is where your mind's fully liberated from any discontentedness. You no longer experience any discontent feelings. And it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't experienced any anger, any frustration, even the slightest annoyance, the slightest displeasure is completely liberated mind, that the mind is completely enlightened. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you're practicing the tenfold path. But it's the eightfold path that is going to get you there. So right wisdom is having that ease to be able to explain the teachings. Right liberation is having the mind completely free of all discontentedness. And you'll see the Buddha talk about the tenfold path very rarely, but here I thought I would point that out for you guys. And then he's talking about different things here. He's talking about the 5 hindrances, and other things that he's describing here. So if you guys have any questions on what any of these things are, this is a great list of things to purge from your practice and then cultivate the wholesome qualities that he's talking about, all while remaining humble and down to earth. Let me know if you guys have any questions here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 8. Here, this one is titled, The Discontentedness of Heavenly Beings and Humans. Monks, heavenly beings and humans seek excitement in forms, have excitement in forms, excite in forms. With the change fading away and elimination of forms, heavenly beings and humans dwell in discontentedness. In the case of sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects, the discourses are similar to that of forms. But monks, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, has understood as they really are the cause and disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of forms. He does not seek excitement in forms, does not have excitement in forms, does not excite in forms. With the change fading away and elimination of forms, the Tathagata resides joyful. In the case of sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects, the discourses are similar to that of forms. So what the Buddha is talking about here is what we just studied in Volume 9, which is the 6 sense bases, how in the unenlightened state, beings in these realms of heavenly and human realm, the Buddha is saying that they dwell in discontentedness because they seek excitement in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects. The mind is having craving, and it wants these pleasant feelings from the contact through the 6 sense spaces of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. And because the mind craves permanence, with the change fading away in elimination, that's the universal truth of impermanence. When things change, because the mind is craving for these things to be permanent, having permanent agreeable forms, permanently agreeable sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects, when things start changing, the mind's going to then dwell in this discontentedness. That's what someone's experiencing in the unenlightened state. But what the Buddha is explaining here is that him, as the Tathagata, which means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth, the Arahant, meaning that he's eliminated the 10 fetters. Anybody who's eliminated the 10 fetters is an Arahant, but he's the perfectly enlightened one, meaning he did it by himself without the help of any teachers or any guides, that he has understood as they really are the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape. This is what we talked about in our last classes, where I explained what each one of these things are. And then because he understands these and he's practicing them closely, he does not seek excitement in forms, does not have excitement in forms, and does not excite in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects. And then when those things are changing, fading away in elimination, meaning when they're experienced in impermanence, which all these things are experiencing impermanence, the Tathagata resides joyful, because as all these things are changing, his mind doesn't have craving and clinging. So he's not going to experience discontentedness when all these things are changing. So that's what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, is all these things start changing in your life. Now that you start to understand the truth, you train your mind to not crave and cling. But right now, because your mind does have craving and it does have clinging, as these things are changing, your mind's going to experience discontentedness. But when you train your mind so well that it doesn't grab on, that it doesn't crave and it doesn't cling, now when things are changing, you're going to continue to reside joyful. So your mind doesn't have this discontentedness. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 9. Discontentedness because of the 6 sense bases. Monks, heavenly beings and humans seek excitement in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects. Have excitement in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects. excite in forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects, with the change, fading away, and elimination of forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects, heavenly beings and humans dwell in discontentedness. So this is the same thing that I just explained in the previous discourse, but here it's just spoken a little bit differently. So I suspect you guys don't have questions here because you didn't have questions on the last one. But if you do, just let me know that you have questions here. We'll move on to chapter 10 here. This one is titled, Consideration to Go Forth into Homelessness. Monks, before my enlightenment. Oh, this is Sumit. Go ahead, Sumit, if you have a question or if you'd like to read this.
I would like to read this.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Considering to go forth into homelessness. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still unawakened, not yet fully enlightened, I too being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, sought what was also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. And what may be said to be subject birth to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, wife and children are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses and mares, gold and silver are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. These objects of attachment are subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, and one who is tied to these things, obsessed with them, and entirely craving them, being himself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeks what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement. Then I considered thus, why being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement, do I seek what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, defilement? Suppose that, being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I seek the unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless, enlightenment, sorrowless, and undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana, enlightenment. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with youthfulness in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise and wept with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. Here, Bhardavaja, before my enlightenment, while I was still unawakened, not yet fully awakened, I considered the household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life entirely perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here we're getting a glimpse into the life of Siddhartha Gautama before he was actually a Buddha. He's talking about before his enlightenment, that he had this craving, desire, attachment. He was longing and yearning, chasing after things that were subject to impermanence. That's what he means by subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, that these things are subject to impermanence, but yet he sought after them. He craved them. He longed and yearned for them, just like an unenlightened being, because he was unenlightened. That's what he did. But he ultimately got to the point where he realized all these different things were subject to impermanence, and his mind was craving permanence. So he decided to train his mind to eliminate that. And he did that through going to homelessness, which he shaved off his hair, he put on the ordained robes, and he went into this homelessness to be able to then figure out how to attain enlightenment. And he did this because he realized that the household life is crowded and dusty. What he's talking about is it's very challenging to get to enlightenment from the household life, but it's possible. It's not something that is significantly difficult, and it's not something that's easy either. Even getting ordained and getting to enlightenment, it's not easy, but it's not difficult either. Over time, over 2,500 years, people have made it more difficult because the teachings of the Buddha have been changed and changed and changed and modified, and more people aren't learning with the original words of the Buddha. But if you go back to the original words like we do here in this community, and we study the teachings through learning, reflecting, and practicing, there's no reason why you can't get to enlightenment. As I mentioned, the household life during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was a lot more challenging to get to enlightenment during that time than it is even now, because we have so many advances in technology to be able to help us. But also, what he's talking about here is all these temptations in the household life. That in the household life, there's all these sensual desires that are pulling and tugging at you here and there, where in the ordained life, your life is structured in such a way that the temptations are significantly reduced and significantly diminished. Even things like food, you're just walking down the street accepting whatever food is given to you, and you eat whatever food is given to you. You're not even choosing what food you eat. So you can take some of these things that are going on in the ordained life and replicate them in your life. So rather than allow your mind to be involved in choosing your food, if you go out to a restaurant, you can just ask the server, what would you recommend that I eat? And they say, okay, I recommend you eat this. Okay, I'll take that. Or if you're out to lunch with your friends and somebody orders something, even if it's something you would never order, you just say, okay, I'll take the same thing as her. I'll take the same thing as him. This is the way to take your mind out of the decision process of what you eat. So you can look at some of the things that the ordained practitioners are doing and replicate that in your life. Like they wear very, very simple clothing because they're training their mind to eliminate personal existence view. The mind is not involved in choosing what they wear each day. They just wear the same orange robe every single day. So you could do that too in your life, where you just stack up your clothes and you just pick off the top of your stack and just wear whatever clothes are on the top of the stack. Don't allow your mind to sit there in front of your closet and think about, who am I going to see today? How do I want to look? I want to impress this person or impress that person. Don't allow the mind to do that. So there's things like this that you can do where you can replicate in your household life, because we understand enough about that ordained lifestyle that you can get ordained and go in that direction, or you can maintain your household lifestyle. Maybe you've got a life partner, maybe you've got children, maybe you've got a career that you're interested in pursuing, and you can do those things while still progressing to enlightenment. But you're going to need to develop your life practice and set aside time to have this inner discipline, to be reading, to coming to classes, to meditating, and doing all those things that are sometimes often challenging for a household practitioner. Whereas as an ordained practitioner, you're fully in, and your whole entire goal is to get to enlightenment. And you're not having a career, you don't have a house, you don't have to do all the things that a household practitioner does. So you have a lot of time to do the work to get to enlightenment. That's why the Buddha is saying here, life gone forth is wide open, because you don't have these obligations and responsibilities from the people around you. So you can replicate a lot of what goes on in the ordained life in your household life. You just need to be understanding how to do that and be creative in how to do that. And where you need help, you can reach out to me and I will help you, because I live this household life for a reason, because the Buddha lived an ordained life and he showed how to get to enlightenment that way. My goal is to stay in the household life so I can help people to understand how to get to enlightenment through the household life. But there's certain things from the ordained life that you can practice in the household life that replicate a lot of what they're doing, if you understand what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then how to replicate that in your own life. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this particular chapter. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So I will just thank all of you guys for joining for today's class. Thank you for those of you guys that read. Thank you for the questions that you guys asked. This really helps to make the class more full and more vibrant. It allows us to really study a lot more deeply and for you to get a lot more benefit. So as you guys are reading and asking questions, this really helps the class to become more full. If you would like to read these chapters before and or after class, you can download the books from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and then from there you have a free books to be able to study, and you can print them if you like. You can order them on Amazon, or if you're here in Chiang Mai, you can get them at the temple as well. So you're going to need these books to be able to explore volumes 2 through 13. That's the Pali Canon and English Study Group. The group learning program on Sunday and Wednesdays, we use volume 1. And the same thing, you can download it, you can take it and go print it, or you can order it on Amazon or get it here at the temple, and then you'll be able to have access to the book. Next week in this program, I'm going to be exploring chapters 11 through chapters 20 of volume 10. So if you'd like to prepare ahead of time, you'll be able to see the words of the Buddha, the reference back to the original source, and you'll see the words from me to be able to help you reflect on the teachings of the Buddha and gain even more benefit out of what he's teaching you. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 10 of volume 1, which is titled, What is Merit? This is a unique type of wholesome karma that you're going to need to understand how to practice in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So I'm going to be teaching you guys that using the words of the Buddha, but teaching it to you more in a traditional format where I'm going to be teaching and then opening up to any questions that you guys have as we go through the actual class. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing guided meditation together. We're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation, and then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. And remember, all of these classes on Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday, they're now at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. Thai time, that I'm live streaming them both from the temple in the morning and then from at home here in the evening. So no matter what time zone you're in, you should be able to tune into a live class. And then where you can't make the live class, there's the recording on Facebook, YouTube, and the podcast. So you can digest that content on Monday, Tuesday, or whatever day works best for you. So remember, you are your own island, that you are your own independent journey to enlightenment, and I'm here to guide you and provide you the resources, but you're going to need to do that work, remaining dedicated, determined, and diligent in your practice. So thank you all for joining for today's class. We'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.